The United States Congress is preparing for an emergency vote on a short-term federal funding measure as lawmakers face a rapidly approaching deadline to prevent a partial government shutdown. Negotiations have intensified on Capitol Hill, with party leaders working to secure sufficient support for a continuing resolution that would temporarily extend current spending levels. The immediate objective is procedural stability. A lapse in appropriations would trigger a shutdown affecting a range of federal agencies, disrupting administrative operations, delaying certain payments, and suspending non-essential government services. While essential functions such as national security, border protection, and air traffic control would continue, the broader institutional impact could extend well beyond Washington. At the core of the current impasse are disagreements over discretionary spending levels, defense allocations, domestic program funding, and fiscal offsets. Some lawmakers are pressing for tighter budget caps and spending reductions, citing long-term debt sustainability concerns. Others argue that underfunding key federal programs would undermine economic resilience and strategic capacity, particularly at a time of heightened geopolitical competition. The United States is operating in a complex international environment. Global supply chains remain sensitive to fiscal and political uncertainty in major economies. A funding lapse in the world's largest economy can amplify volatility in currency markets, treasury yields, and equity indices. Even short-term uncertainty can influence capital flows and investor confidence. Financial markets are closely monitoring the situation. Historically, brief government shutdowns have had limited long-term economic impact. However, prolonged fiscal standoffs can weigh on GDP growth, delay federal contracting payments, and reduce consumer and business confidence. The U.S. Treasury market, a benchmark for global finance, remains central to international liquidity and sovereign debt pricing. Beyond domestic fiscal mechanics, the vote carries implications for U.S. foreign policy execution. Federal funding supports diplomatic missions, defense cooperation programs, foreign aid disbursements, and security assistance commitments. Any interruption may complicate coordination with allies and partners, particularly in regions facing ongoing security challenges. Defense appropriations are especially sensitive. The United States maintains global military commitments, from Europe to the Indo-Pacific. Budgetary uncertainty can affect procurement schedules, maintenance cycles, and long-term modernization programs. For allies reliant on U.S. security guarantees, fiscal predictability in Washington is closely linked to strategic planning. Technology policy is another dimension affected by federal funding stability. Agencies responsible for semiconductor incentives, artificial intelligence oversight, cybersecurity coordination, and advanced research funding depend on timely appropriations. Delays can slow grant allocations, regulatory implementation, and public-private partnerships in critical technology sectors. Trade policy and economic diplomacy also intersect with federal operations. Ongoing negotiations related to supply chain resilience, export controls, and industrial policy require sustained administrative capacity. A shutdown could temporarily limit policy engagement or delay regulatory actions affecting multinational corporations and cross-border commerce. The political context surrounding the emergency vote reflects broader structural tensions in U.S. fiscal governance. Divided government often produces negotiation-driven outcomes, where short-term funding extensions substitute for comprehensive budget agreements. Continuing resolutions maintain operational continuity, but do not resolve underlying fiscal debates over entitlement reform, defense posture, taxation, or deficit reduction. Rating agencies and international financial institutions are monitoring the trajectory of U.S. fiscal policymaking. In recent years, concerns over debt ceiling disputes and fiscal brinksmanship have prompted reassessments of sovereign credit outlooks. While the United States retains deep structural economic strengths, repeated episodes of budgetary uncertainty can shape perceptions of governance reliability. For global partners, predictability in U.S. fiscal and legislative processes is linked to broader confidence in international economic architecture. The U.S. dollar's reserve currency status, the scale of treasury markets, and the country's central role in multilateral institutions amplify the international consequences of domestic budget disputes. The emergency vote itself is expected to focus on a temporary funding measure designed to provide additional time for negotiations. Lawmakers must balance immediate continuity with longer-term fiscal objectives. The outcome will signal not only short-term political compromise, but also the durability of bipartisan coordination under current political conditions. If Congress approves the measure, federal operations will continue without interruption, and attention will shift to negotiating a full-year appropriations framework. If the vote fails, even a short-lived shutdown could introduce administrative delays and market uncertainty, with potential spillover effects across sectors tied to federal spending. In the coming days, markets, allied governments, and federal agencies will assess whether this episode represents routine fiscal negotiation or a deeper structural constraint in U.S. governance. The emergency vote is therefore more than a procedural step. It is a test of institutional capacity, fiscal credibility, and strategic continuity at a time of global economic and geopolitical complexity.